Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump signs the first bill of his second presidency. Trump signing into law the Laken Act and announcing a move to keep criminal illegal immigrants at Guantanamo Bay. More on his actions and executive orders. While President Trump is busy running the country, his legal teams today appealed the New York conviction and dismissed the classified documents case against two co-defendants. The Federal Reserve hits pause on interest rate cuts, what Fed Chair Jerome Powell says about the decision, and the current state of the economy. RFK Jr. was in the hot seat in front of a Senate committee as President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Health and Human Services on day one of his confirmation hearing. Jason Blair reports. And the Trump administration is offering federal workers a chance to resign with pay, but critics say it's a push to purge the workforce. We're on the Deferred Resignation Program.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump signs into law the Laken Act, the first legislation to get to his desk in his second term. Along with the legislative win, Trump also announces a new move to send illegal immigrants to Guantanamo Bay. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent, Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. Tell us more about what the president's actions today were.
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. Today, President Trump signed into law the Laken Act, which will require federal officials to arrest and detain illegal immigrants who have been accused of crimes like theft, assault on police officers, or causing the death or serious injury to others. And President Trump, while signing the act, highlighted the case of Laken, a Georgia nursing student who was brutally killed by an illegal immigrant. Watch.
She was a light of warmth and kindness in every single room. With today's action, her name will also live forever in the laws of our country, and this is a very important law. This is something that has brought Democrats and Republicans together.
And notably, the Laken Act was passed in Congress with not just Republican support, but also with the support of dozens of Democratic lawmakers. Trump today highlighting that bipartisan support. Meanwhile, the parents and the sister of Laken were also at the signing ceremony today. Her mom, speaking emotionally, thanks President Trump for keeping his word to protect the border and remembering her daughter's name.
There's no amount of change that will ever bring back our precious Laken. Our hope moving forward is that her life saves lives. We're so thankful that her passion for helping others and her legacy for doing good in the name of Jesus Christ will carry on. Thank you.
And during the signing ceremony today, President Trump also announced a new order to send up to 30,000 illegal immigrants, or what he calls worst of the worst, to Guantanamo Bay. And President Trump's border czar Tom Homan, talking to us on the White House campus this afternoon, told us that that's already actually expanding an existing migrant center at Gitmo. Watch.
Detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them.
The significant public safety threats, we can fly them. We fly.
We're doing it. We're already doing it.
We identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms for Hamas. 50 million. And you know what's happened to them? They've used them as a method of making bombs.
And that was President Trump addressing the latest move to stop funding and some grants to some agencies and programs. We remember that there's been this controversy starting 2 days ago when there's a memo by the Office of Management and Budget going out to all agencies saying that it's pausing those funds. But of course, on Wednesday, we saw another move by the office that is actually rescinding that memo. The White House did clarify to us today, though, that does not mean that the funding that they wanted to freeze is actually actually not frozen anymore. They say that although the memo was rescinded, the funding that specifically they're targeting, for example, those going out to what they call wasteful programs, as well as to foreign contractors, some of them targeting DEI, transgenderism, and other subjects that President Trump, in his executive order, specifically mentioned that he will target those funds and monies actually will still be subject to administration's freezing. Meanwhile, this is the latest movement today surrounding that controversy. So President Trump addressing a variety of topics today.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. President Trump's lawyers filed a notice of appeal today seeking to overturn his conviction in the New York business records case. The conviction made Trump the first person with a criminal record to win a presidential election. A jury found the president guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records. A notice of appeal starts the appeals process in New York. In the Trump classified documents case, pending charges against co-defendants Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira have been tossed. Prosecutors had appealed the district court's dismissal of the case. The Trump administration withdrew the appeal today, which formally ends the case. The Justice Department dropped the case against Trump shortly after he won the election. Former Senator Bob Menendez was sentenced to 11 years in prison this afternoon for his 2024 bribery conviction. A jury found the New Jersey Democrat guilty in July of taking bribes in exchange for favors he provided to Egypt and New Jersey businessmen. District Judge Sidney Stein imposed the sentence in Manhattan federal court. Menendez spent almost 19 years representing New Jersey in the Senate. The former lawmaker was convicted on all 16 felony counts last summer, including bribery, fraud, and acting as a foreign agent. He resigned from the Senate in August. Prosecutors allege Menendez facilitated military aid for Egypt, provided assistance to Qatar, and interfered in local prosecutions of allied businessmen. In exchange, he received bribes including gold bars, cash, and a Mercedes-Benz. Menendez has vowed to appeal. The Federal Reserve today hit pause on interest rate cuts. This is the agency's first key decision in President Trump's second term.
Today, the Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. I'll have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. For 2024 as a whole, GDP looks to have risen above 2%, bolstered by resilient consumer spending. Investment in equipment and intangibles appears to have slowed in the fourth quarter, but was strong for the year overall.
Central bank officials opted to keep borrowing costs in a range of between 4.25 and 4.5%. They're awaiting further progress on inflation, which remains above the 2% target. U.S. stocks dipped following the Fed's announcement. RFK Jr. was in the hot seat in front of a Senate committee as President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Health and Human Services. On day one, Kennedy faced praise, criticism, and plenty of tough questions. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. spent hours in front of the Senate Finance Committee Wednesday, making statements and answering questions on day one of his nomination hearings.
There is no single culprit in chronic disease. Much as I have criticized certain industries and agencies, President Trump and I understand that most of their scientists and experts genuinely care about American health. Therefore, we will bring together all stakeholders in pursuit of this unifying goal.
Kennedy is scheduled for 2 days of hearings, which will be followed by a full Senate vote on whether or not to confirm him as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Many senators probed Kennedy about his stance on vaccines. Senator Ron Wyden alleged that Kennedy has embraced conspiracy theories, especially on the safety and efficacy of vaccines.
He has made it his life's work to sow doubt and discourage parents from getting their kids life-saving vaccines.
But Kennedy pushed back, saying that he's not anti-vaccine or anti-industry, but he is pro-safety.
I worked for years to raise awareness about the mercury and toxic chemicals in fish, and nobody called me anti-fish. And I believe that that vaccines play a critical role in healthcare. All of my kids are vaccinated.
Along with a fair share of challenging questions, the need for unity also came up. Senator Ron Johnson said that we need to heal and unify as a nation.
I'm not necessarily the most optimistic guy because we've got enormous challenges facing this nation. But I thought, wow, here's somebody from the left, somebody I don't agree with on many issues politically, coming together with President Trump and focusing on an area of agreement, something that the American people desperately want.
There's no issue that should unite us more than this chronic health epidemic. There's no such thing as Republican children or Democratic children. These are our kids. 66% of them are damaged.
Kennedy is scheduled for one more Senate nomination hearing with a vote to happen sometime after that. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Jason Blair, NTD News.
The House Republican annual policy retreat has concluded, and lawmakers are traveling back to D.C. to finalize the budget reconciliation proposal. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on the story.
Day 3 of the House Republican annual policy retreat is over, and House Republican leadership have not yet divulged any details on the total costs and total spending cuts of the budget reconciliation proposal.
History will look back at this retreat as this is where the blueprint for change began. We listened, we strategized, and now we've put pen to paper, and the House will be ready to lead the way.
According to House Republican leadership, 11 committee chairs have been involved in the negotiation process for the budget reconciliation proposal, and 98% of the House Republican Conference has given their input into this process. Only 14 members of the House Republican Conference have not participated so far, and many of them due to scheduling issues.
We stay unified, we can get anything done. We have to hash out our differences, and that's what we're doing. There will be 11 committees involved in the actual budget reconciliation process. And so a number of those committee chairs had sessions where they laid out the details. You know, these are the things we're going to work on. These are the savings that we're going to achieve.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson tamed the public's expectation on spending cuts. According to Speaker Johnson, the House Republican Conference budget reconciliation proposal will have a spending cut floor of what House Republicans believe is the minimum necessary spending cuts required to deliver President Trump's campaign promises, instead of aiming for a spending cut ceiling.
And as we've said, when we return to the Hill, the Budget Committee will be marking up a budget that serves as the foundation for the reconciliation process. That's going to happen, and we'll get it through the whole chamber, and we'll be voting on that by late February, and that will keep us on the aggressive schedule that has been set out to make sure we accomplish this mission.
On Wednesday, Speaker Johnson restated the House Republican Conference's goal of having a budget reconciliation resolution by the end of the month of February. According to Speaker Johnson, if House Republicans are able to deliver on President Trump's campaign promises, House Republicans will be able to hold on to the majority in the lower chamber of Congress for over a decade. Reporting from Miami, Florida, Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The Trump administration is offering substantial buyouts to federal workers as part of a plan to drastically shrink the government. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the so-called deferred resignation program.
The program allows federal employees to stay on the payroll until September 30th without having to work. A mass email was sent to federal workers, giving them until February 6th to decide whether to participate. The unprecedented message instructed those interested to simply reply with the word resign. The offer applies to most civilian employees, excluding those in immigration, national security, and the postal service. The government currently employs around 2.3 million civilian workers, not counting postal employees. The email warns that those who decline the offer should expect a shift toward a more streamlined workforce based on 4 key pillars: return to office, ending remote work; performance culture, implementing updated standards to reward top performers while addressing those who fail to meet expectations; more streamlined and flexible workforce, downsizing federal agencies through restructuring, realignments, and layoffs; and enhanced standards of conduct, tightening workplace rules. The message also states that employees who choose to stay in their positions cannot be guaranteed job security, but promises that those affected by job cuts will be treated with dignity. In response, American Federation of Government Employees Union President Everett Kelly argued the move should not be seen as a voluntary buyout. Instead, he called it an effort to pressure workers deemed disloyal to the administration into resigning. The memo, unsigned and sent from a newly created email address, hr@opm.gov, was titled Fork in the Road. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The Trump administration is ending the protected status of over 500,000 Venezuelans in the U.S. This comes as ICE reports it has already arrested over 5,000 illegal immigrants since President Trump took office. NTD's Ariane Pazdar has an immigration update.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says her predecessor enacted extended protection for Venezuelans in the U.S. before he left office. The Trump administration is now getting rid of it through an executive order on Wednesday. Here's Noem talking about the issue on Fox News.
We were not going to follow through on what he did to tie our hands, that we are going to follow the process, evaluate all of these individuals that are in our country, including the Venezuelans that are here.
The extended protection had given Venezuelans an additional 18 months of deportation relief and access to work permits. Noem says the U.S. is now in talks to send the individuals back to Venezuela. A day prior, on Tuesday, Venezuela's socialist president, Nicolas Maduro, said this about possible returns.
We want them to return so they can be happy here, so they can come to create businesses, work, and build in their land.
Noem added that the State Department is speaking with other countries about taking their citizens back as well. This comes as planes continue landing in Colombia this week, bringing back deported immigrants. Colombia's president on Wednesday saying the U.S. shouldn't treat all immigrants as criminals, only those who committed crimes.
One man said all Jews were criminals, and he killed 6 million of them. Were they criminals? Were they? Or was it a Nazi error?
On Tuesday, the new White House press secretary commented on that same issue about only deporting immigrants who committed crimes.
And if you are an individual, a foreign national, who illegally enters the United States of America, you are, by definition, a criminal.
Meanwhile, in the U.S., new video published on Wednesday shows ICE raiding a building in Chicago. They reportedly detained immigrants suspected of having ties to the Venezuelan gang Trendy Aragua. This comes as ICE gives an update on the arrests of illegal immigrants since President Trump took office. The agency says that, as of Wednesday, it made over 5,500 arrests and lodged over 4,300 detainers. ICE agents are conducting raids and arrests across the country. Locations often targeted are major cities like New York and Chicago. Ariane Pazdar, NTD News.
Coming up, residents in Israel are preparing for more hostages to be released tomorrow. Meanwhile, a major UN agency is ordered to stop operations in Israel. Jason Perry reports. More than 50 European politicians gathered in Brussels, rallying under the slogan, "Make Europe Great Again." Inspired by President Trump's policies, they discussed border control, national identity, and free speech. And Chinese operatives are escalating threats against Falun Gong practitioners and U.S. lawmakers who support them. More on their plans for violence and bombings after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Residents in Israel are preparing for more hostages to be released tomorrow. Meanwhile, a major UN agency has 24 hours to stop operations in Israel. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Residents in Israel gathered in Jerusalem as they continue to call for the release of all remaining hostages still held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And on Wednesday, an Israeli government spokesman confirmed the hostages are set to be released on Thursday. They include civilian hostage Arbel Yehud, Israeli soldier Agam Berger, and another civilian that he did not name. However, people at the demonstration received news that the third individual to be released was 80-year-old Gadi Moses.
Some happy and exciting moments to know that Gadi Moses, who is 80 years old, survived the Hamas captivity and he's going to be back with the 2 girls tomorrow.
Also on Wednesday, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with U.S. envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. And according to Israel's Channel 13, Witkoff's visit to Israel included an inspection of the corridor that separates the North and South Gaza Strip. And for the past few days, tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians have passed through that corridor as they return to their homes in northern Gaza for the first time in over a year. However, one resident said he didn't stay there for long before deciding to go back to Khan Yunis in southern Gaza.
There is no food or anything to drink, no water, nothing. Ghost without souls. We all miss the north, but when I went there, I was shocked. So I'll return to Khan Yunis until God relieves us. I've been traveling back since 4 a.m., heading to Khan Yunis.
And speaking of food and water, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, also known as UNRWA, must stop operations in Israel by Thursday. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, gave their reasoning on Tuesday.
This decision was driven by UNRWA's constant refusal to address the widespread infiltration of its ranks by Hamas and other terrorist organizations.
The commissioner of UNRWA said the decision is harming the lives and future of Palestinians.
At stake is the fate of millions of Palestinians, the ceasefire, and the prospect for a political solution that brings lasting peace and security.
Meanwhile, the deputy U.S. ambassador to the UN said the U.S. supports Israel's decision.
UNRWA exaggerating the effects of the laws and suggesting that they will force the entire humanitarian response to halt is irresponsible and dangerous.
Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon reaffirmed Israel's readiness to cooperate with other UN agencies that he says are not tainted by terror. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Conservative movements and politicians rallied in Brussels for a Make Europe Great Again meeting. They talked about how European countries could follow the example of the new Trump administration and some of its policies. NTD's international correspondent David Vives reports from Brussels.
More than 50 politicians across Europe, mostly members of parliament, state officials, former ministers, have gathered today in Brussels. They rallied under the slogan, Make Europe Great Again. They said that Trump's victory has empowered conservative movement across Europe and are envisioning a future where European policies could follow the path set by the US president. Speakers said the Trump administration set an example to follow.
Up until now, the people have been told, well, we can't protect our borders. We can't close our border. It's impossible. We simply can't do it. Even if we wanted to, it's impossible. And now, Donald Trump is just, guess what, I'm just doing it. So, of course, and then people will see, well, wait a minute, it is possible to do that. Of course, it's possible.
They also say European countries should work to defend their values and identities.
We need to defend our European civilization, which is something quite different from just the current globalist trend. I want to refer to a very specific historical, cultural, and spiritual identity, and which today is seriously threatened both by the threat posed by woke ideology. We need to find back faith, tradition, also belief in God.
Trump's diplomacy toward Europe seems to have taken a different turn from his first term. Top EU diplomat Kaja Kallas said she invited U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio to a foreign ministers' meeting to strengthen ties, but was offered no answer. According to an article published by Politico, President Donald Trump may prefer to deal directly with individual state members rather than EU officials. This potential strain in relations may benefit European leaders who align their policies on Donald Trump's approach. According to President of the Italian think tank Nazione Futura, Francesco Jubilei, EU top officials have distanced themselves from Trump in the past, which may explain the situation.
The position of the European Union in the last few years was a position totally against the Republican Party and a position totally against Donald Trump. But now we must have a realpolitik. Donald Trump, also if maybe Ursula von der Leyen or some other people in the European Union, they don't like him, but right now he's the President of the United States. So we must talk with him.
He believes Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who was the only European head of state invited to Donald Trump's inauguration, could be a leading figure for Europe.
And having a Prime Minister which can talk with him in a good relationship like Giorgia Meloni can be something good for all the European Union.
David Vives, NTD News, Brussels.
Practitioners of faith group Falun Gong and U.S. lawmakers who support them are facing new threats, with emails warning of violent attacks. The Falun Dafa Information Center revealed yesterday a message threatening to bomb Dragon Springs in upstate New York. That's the site of a Tang Dynasty-style Buddhist temple and a campus hosting 2 religious art schools. It also holds rehearsal spaces for the performing arts company Shenyuan. At least 17 similar threats have targeted Shenyuan since March of last year. Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a traditional Chinese spiritual practice. It has been brutally persecuted in China since 1999. The newest threats come amid growing pressure from the Chinese Communist Party, which has long sought to silence Falun Gong worldwide. The Epoch Times learned in December that Chinese leader Xi Jinping personally gave instructions in 2022 for top officials to suppress Falun Gong globally. Coming up, RFK Jr. faces tough questions from senators during his first confirmation hearing. An Epoch Times reporter joins us to react to the hearing and Kennedy's performance. Trump media expands into financial services. It says it's to protect patriots from cancellation and censorship. And could your favorite podcaster attend the White House briefing? NTD's Sam Wong went out in D.C. to hear what people think about the new briefing policy and how it could change journalism when we come back. Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, here's some of today's top headlines. President Trump signed the Laken Act as his administration's first piece of legislation. Trump also ended protected status for Venezuelans and announced that he will open a detention center at Guantanamo Bay to hold criminal illegal immigrants. The Federal Reserve announced it has paused interest rate cuts and opted to keep borrowing costs stable. This is the agency's first key decision of Trump's second term. The Justice Department abandoned all criminal proceedings against Trump's 2 co-defendants in the Florida classified documents case. They are Trump's valet, Walt Nauta, and Mar-a-Lago property manager, Carlos de Oliveira. The Senate held a confirmation hearing for Trump's Health and Human Services nominee, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Senators asked him about his views on vaccines, chronic diseases, Medicaid, Medicare, and abortion. Joining us now to react to the confirmation hearing is Epoch Times reporter Jeff Louderback. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. Now, this was arguably one of the more contentious hearings, perhaps since Hegseth. You've covered RFK Jr. on the campaign trail. How do you think he fared in today's hearing?
Well, I think he held himself, he did really well because he was expecting everything. From the beginning, I started covering the campaign, I think it was April 2023. He's faced that same skepticism and same criticism from the Democratic Party, from the DNC, and even from Republicans since that time and over the course of that time. So I don't think anything happened that was surprising to him.
And how much ground on substantive future health policy do you think was covered at today's hearing?
Well, I think he outlined his plan in general, which focuses on vaccine safety, focuses on cleaning up the food supply, ending corporate capture of government agencies. He touched a little bit on that. He seemed to, as expected, face a lot of scrutiny, a lot of questions about his abortion stance from Democrats and Republicans alike. And then, of course, Democrats have an issue with what they call his vaccine skepticism. But from the beginning, RFK Jr. has advocated for vaccine safety and informed consent. He's never said he's against vaccines. He's always talked about how he's for vaccine safety, informed consent, and thorough nonpartisan studies of vaccines, whether they are safe or not.
Now, RFK Jr. seemed to stay on message today to what he's previously said on the campaign trail. How much of an influence do you think President Trump has had on him, or vice versa?
Well, I think they've had mutual benefit because when back at the height of RFK Jr.'s campaign, he was polling in double digits, and I covered events all around the country, and I would always talk to a lot of people there. it was rare to find a Democrat there. It was all former or current Trump supporters. Some people were curious about RFK Jr. Some people were supporting him over Trump. So it was understandable why Trump wanted him to leave the race and back him. And really, when you look at it, RFK's support or the support from former RFK people who would have voted for RFK helped Trump win in certain states. So now, obviously, he wants to implement the Make America Healthy Again plan, and we'll soon see whether he is confirmed.
Now, on that note, RFK Jr. says he wants to hold the National Institutes of Health to the gold standard, adding that means real scientific research with replication of studies. Given what you know from his campaign, what kind of changes should we expect to see if he does become secretary?
Well, it's more accountability. Obviously, he's talked about revamping the agencies. HHS serves multiple agencies, but the main ones are FDA, CDC, and NIH. He wants to bring on employees who are focused on accountability, on transparency, on the MAHA platform, Make America Healthy Again platform. He wants to have it essentially, simply put, science-based. He wants these agencies to not be owned and operated by corporate influence, but as they were intended to years ago, to manage their specific issues. So obviously NIH, CDC, and FDA have different purposes. He doesn't want any corporate influence in those. And I think that that's something that seems like we would all agree on.
And if Kennedy isn't confirmed, do you still see him being involved in the Trump administration in some capacity? What options would Trump have here?
That is a question I was thinking about today. I don't know the answer to that as far as what he would do if for some reason he wasn't confirmed. Obviously, he has a long history of advocacy as an environmental attorney and with Children's Health Defense. He resigned his post with Children's Health Defense, the nonprofit he founded, to be able to focus on HHS. But Make America Healthy Again is a movement that's not just, a one-time thing or related to President Trump getting elected. It's something that will be long-term. So I don't really, to be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know if he's even thought about that. So all he needs is 50 votes, and likely Vice President J.D. Vance would cast the tie-breaking vote in his favor, kind of like Pete Hegseth. But it'll be interesting to see because you have Mitch McConnell, Senator Murkowski, Senator Collins, Republicans who could vote against Kennedy. Then you have wild cards like Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, John Fetterman, who are Democrats. They could vote for Kennedy. So it's going to be fascinating. He's before the Senate Health Committee tomorrow, but ultimately it's the Senate Finance Committee that determines whether he advances to the floor for a full Senate vote.
A lot to watch for here. Jeff Louderback, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Trump media is entering financial services. It says the move is to protect American patriots from cancellation and censorship. Here's the story.
Trump media is expanding into financial services, partnering with Charles Schwab. CEO Devin Nunes says Trump.fi will offer investment products and decentralized finance for American patriots.
It's an idea that a lot of people are excited about because financial services is going to be disrupted, just like every industry that software has disrupted. But this is supercharged software, which is the Bitcoin or blockchain technology.
Financial expert Vijay Murolia says this is a smart move because he believes blockchain tech will grow faster in the coming years. Truth.fi says cryptocurrency investments will be among its offerings. Nunez says this is part of creating an ecosystem where, quote, American patriots can protect themselves from the ever-present threat of cancellation, censorship, and debanking.
Debanking is for real. Debanking is serious. It's anti-American to debank somebody for the way that they feel especially if it's a feeling about a political situation.
President Trump is the majority owner of Trump Media, which owns social media platform Truth Social. NTD reached out to Trump Media but didn't hear back before airtime. Nunez says Trump.fi is expected to launch sometime in 2025.
Journalists buckle up for a more competitive 4 years at the White House. The Trump administration has announced it's allowing non-traditional media outlets in the press room. From podcasters to social media content creators. Are Americans on board with the change? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from them.
So the White House is now saying that they're going to have alternative media platforms like podcasters and social media influencers in the press room now. So do you think it's a good thing?
I think it's a solid thing, giving, I guess, more of the common people more available voice.
For sure. I think the more transparent the government is, the better.
The more information, the better. The more sharing, the better. You know, freedom of speech and spreading the word is what it's all about.
I would be curious to know if it's going to be balanced, and I don't think it'll be balanced.
I think it's a good thing. I also hope it's not biased to a specific range of thought.
I think it is a good thing because a lot of social media influencers, all different political standpoints, I feel like an issue with most news channels, they're very biased.
I'm curious to see how they're vetting and determining who gets in and who doesn't, because, you know, we know that historically Donald Trump has at his will just kicked out journalists that he doesn't like.
Who would you like to see in there? Anybody that comes to mind?
I mean, not really. I think that probably the best podcasters in the world are ones I've never heard of.
Myself.
That'd be cool.
You know, why not?
Only thinking about podcasters, I can think of like Joe Rogan maybe.
Yeah, Lex Friedman. I'd like to see Lex in there. I mean, Rogan would be cool, but I have a lot of respect for Lex. Actually used to train jiu-jitsu with Lex.
I know Aaron Parnas has applied to be able to go into the White House. He's an independent journalist, but who knows if he'll be allowed.
Honestly, I want to say just like with actors, I want to see more C-list, more D-list type people come into the scene. I don't want to see the main faces. I think I would want to see new voices.
So how do you think this is going to shake up the media landscape and journalism as a whole?
I think the more information that people can get from the most sources possible is better for everybody.
It's going to modernize it, hopefully in a good way. Hopefully, you know, it's been too long until they started catching up, but fingers crossed it works out.
I think it's going to change because then we can have firsthand news from the people that we already trust. We can let whoever we want in, but I don't know what use it is if the White House, if the press secretary isn't going to be honest.
I hope some way in a positive point, but, you know, a lot of stuff has been happening recently, you know, with Donald Trump getting in office, so I can't really predict, you know, what's going to happen.
People are clearly digging deeper and looking for alternative ways to access their news coverage, and to have them now, you know, in the White House, like on the front lines, I think is fantastic. Yeah.
Coming up in the NFL, how much will a 30-second Super Bowl ad cost you this year? NTD's Dave Martin joins us with the answer after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start in the NFL, as the cost of a 30-second Super Bowl ad this year is reportedly in the $8 million range. Now, these are usually specially made for the Super Bowl, correct?
Yeah, and sometimes they're actually more entertaining in the game. People really like just to watch these Super Bowl ads. Now, we've got a couple of them we're going to play here. The first parts of them, actually. The first is Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal reprising their role in the hit movie When Harry Met Sally. The second one has William Dafoe and Catherine O'Hara in a different ad. We're just going to show the first parts of them. Let's go ahead and play those right now.
Can't believe they let us back in this place.
Why?
Hello?
Nobody remembers that.
Something wrong?
It's not doing it.
No good?
Nothing.
Well, we can't have that.
Yeah.
We'll do 2 Michelob Ultras.
Excuse me, would you consider playing us?
For the Ultras.
Oh, we're kind of at a high level.
Fascinating.
You guys sure you want this?
Please serve. That was fun.
So those look pretty funny. Now, last year, more than 123 million viewers watched the Super Bowl. It's the most watched TV event ever. Could be more even watching this year. I guess that's why they can charge the big bucks.
Oh, moving to baseball news, Yankees owner Hal Steinbrenner commented on the Dodgers offseason, saying it'll be, quote, difficult to keep up. Did he clarify whether he was referring to their payroll?
He actually didn't, but I mean, the Dodgers are way ahead in payroll. I mean, $390 million is what their payroll is at, with 2 months really before the season even starts. Meanwhile, the Phillies are in second at 308, and Steinbrenner's Yankees right behind them at 303, so way behind. And just an FYI, there's a tax threshold when you go for $241 million in salaries that they'll also have to pay, which means altogether they're looking at $500 million for this team. Now, the Yankees have traditionally been a team that could spend with anyone. I mean, they were one of just a few teams that made a competitive offer to get Juan Soto. I mean, he signed for $765 million with the Mets just last month. But baseball does have a major payroll disparity. I think a major issue is that the Dodgers essentially got a freebie this offseason when they signed the top international prospect, Roki Sasaki, for just a $6.5 million signing bonus. He's now the #1 prospect in the game. I mean, that's essentially like the Kansas City Chiefs after winning the Super Bowl, getting the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft. It's a huge get for them. They are hands down the favorites to win the World Series again next season.
Well, shifting gears to the NBA, Hall of Famer Reggie Miller will join NBC Sports as their top color commentator when they start airing games next season.
Yeah, Miller was entertaining as a player. He's also entertaining as a commentator. Now, he's been with TNT Sports actually since 2005. He had a very fun relationship with the fans of the New York Knicks after really torching them as a player in Madison Square Garden. He's really continued that in his commentating. He'll be joined in the booth by broadcasters Mike Tirico and Noah Eagle. Now, NBC used to air NBA games from 1990 through 2002, so they had the Michael Jordan years. But after a 20-year hiatus, they got back into airing NBA games as part of the league's new 11-year, $77 billion media agreement, which also includes ABC as well as NBC and Amazon Prime, and that's going to start next year.
Well, elsewhere in the league, WNBA star Caitlin Clark has turned down an offer to take part in the NBA's three-point shooting contest. Do they normally include WNBA stars in the NBA's All-Star Weekend?
You know, they actually did last year. They had Sabrina Ionescu take on Steph Curry in a three-point challenge. She nearly beat him, too. Apparently, they've had conversations about having a rematch. Now, Ionescu led the WA in threes in 2023. Clark led this past season, though. But Clark said she wants her first three-point shooting contest to come at the WNBA All-Star Game instead. So that's why she declined. That'll be in July. Now, the NBA All-Star Weekend is 2 weeks from this weekend. This weekend, though, is actually a busy weekend for Clark. She's going back to Iowa to have her jersey retired on Sunday as the Hawkeyes face 4th-ranked USC. Now, Iowa's unranked. They have a 14-7 record. USC is 18-1, ranked number 4, so they could essentially use Clark this weekend.
Well, Davis Owens, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and good night. And on behalf of everyone here at NTD, happy Lunar New Year.